What is up, Wretched Nation? Today, let's talk about this new Sportster S that they come out with. I just did some research on it, watched the video, all that kind of stuff up in the office or the Wretched area in my house. Got some orders to work on, and I just wanted to make this video and let's talk about this bike. I don't consider it a Sportster S. I consider it the Bronx. Comment down below, let me know what you think. And if you're new to the channel, thanks for checking us out. Subscribe if you would like to. I would greatly appreciate it. But I got my laptop here and I'm looking at different specs and different things about the bike. And I don't see how it's a Sportster. I believe that they weren't allowed to make the Bronx. If you don't know what that is, check it out. It's a prototype it was supposed to have the Bronx was supposed to come out with like a 975 or something like that engine to be like a smaller version of the Pan America engine. And then maybe later it was going to get the 1250. And I believe that's how it was supposed to go. And that just got scrapped. Harley got a new CEO. You know, it's all about profit, profit, profit. They say they're not making money, and they just couldn't afford it. So that got scrapped, and let's be honest, the Sportster's been very stale for a long time. I've been a big advocate of not buying them new. Just go out and get you one, even if it's 10 years old. It's going to be just pretty much the same as the new one with probably half the price. So it's been pretty stale, and it's needed a refresh, but, you know, no one wants to get rid of that bike. It's Harley's longest running bike. So I totally get it. But let's go over some stuff about the bike. First, I did look at it compared to like the Pan America, and I don't see anything out of the blue because it's the same motor, but it's detuned. So I'm wondering how they detuned it because I believe they have pretty similar torque, but the horsepower is about 30, I think, less on the Sportster. The Sportster S. They have, the Sportster S is listing 121 horsepower at 7,500 RPM, where the Pan America is making 150 at 9,000. Now, looking at that, and I can't find anywhere with the torque being the same and making torque very close to the same RPM, I'm guessing that they're just detuned in the computer, which would be best case scenario. They are changing a lot of things. It's got downdraft intake manifolds, dual intake manifolds. It's got a variable valve timing in the cam, so it's a really nice motor. We'll get into a little bit more of that in a second, but I don't see right off the bat where maybe like internal parts were changed to detune the motor, so it'd be like two different motors. They could have possibly just limited the RPM and maybe did a little bit different tuning to make a bike a little slower on purpose. I don't know why they would do that as far as longevity or performance-wise. It might just be to not compete, or, you know, there might be some reasons here in a minute we'll go over, but that's what the bike has. 121 horsepower, 94 foot-pounds of torque. That's a lot for a Sportster. But let's compare that to what I believe. Well, let's compare that to a Sportster Iron. And first off, this bike is coming in at $14,999. A lot of people are speculating around that $14,000 range. All right, GoPro kind of freaked out and stopped. But the Sportster S is coming in at $14,999, and the Sportster 1200, the Iron 1200, is coming in at $10,250. I would have liked to have seen the Sportster S come in a little bit cheaper. 12.5 would have been, I felt like, a price that would have had them flying off the shelf. Obviously, they may want to do a limited production and just charge more money because they're not going to make as many. But you know, it is what it is. Charging 4,000, basically $4,700 more dollars. It's beginning not to be a Sportster anymore, as far as what it's related to. Now that being said, let's look at the Sportster versus the Sportster S. I'm gonna call it the Iron instead of the Sportster S, or a regular Sportster. So the frame is completely different. It's not a normal frame anymore. It's a lot like or at least it appears to be a lot like the Pan America. Might have this wrong, definitely comment down below, but by the pictures and everything I see, it's not exactly the same bike. And I'm completely fine with that. But the motor is an integral piece to the sport, or to the frame, and it's more like a street bike, or it's exactly like the Pan America, which is going to allow it to do a lot better things than your old Sportster could, as far as handling wise and suspension. Now, I don't have an issue with this bike at all. Like I said, I think they're just going into it from a marketing standpoint. I'm not sure what they're going to do with the normal Sportster line, but it still is kind of like the Sportster motor. The transmission is integral to the engine. It's all one piece. The Pan America is like that, and you have a 6-speed transmission over the regular Sportster 5-speed. But you've got $4,000, basically $5,000 price jump from your Iron 1200 to your Sportster S, but the Iron 1200 doesn't list horsepower. Now I'm taking these off the Harley Davidson website because I just feel like that's the best way to compare. I don't want to Google stuff and get it wrong, but the torque is listed at 73 foot-pounds, which isn't bad, but I'm sure the horsepower number is way off compared to what the Sportster S has. And the Sportster 1200 weighs roughly 60 pounds, roughly 60 pounds more, and that's a lot for a motorcycle. So leaps and bounds over the 1200, but you are paying $5,000 more. Now I'm not complaining about that, I'm just telling you what it is. Now let's compare it to the bigger V-twin. I'm going to compare it to the Softail Standard, because that's like the first model up into the Softail realm, because it actually is more expensive than that. Of course, a lot of people are calling this the mini V-Rod. That's probably what it is. But the Softail Standard is coming in at $13,600. And when you compare that to the $15,000, it's not that far off. But when you start looking at the performance of it, pure performance, it's going to be a big difference. The running weight for the Softail Standard is 655 pounds. So when you compare that to the 503, or let's see exactly what it is. When you compare that to the 502 weight for the Sportster S, that's a big difference. That is going to be way more sluggish than the Sportster S for sure. Now again, on the Softail Standard, they're not listing horsepower, they're just listing torque, which is 110 foot-pounds. That's a lot. So this is definitely going to give it a little bit better run for its money in the power department. That horsepower is probably a little bit lower than 110, not too far. So it's a lot closer, but that weight is really going to hold it back without really getting into the gear ratio and the transmission. But where I think this bike is actually designed is it's kind of a copy or 100% answer to the FTR through Indian. So let's look at that. So when you look at the Indian, that bike is coming in at $14,999. So they're identical on price. And then you look at the power numbers. You have the horsepower when you look at the power numbers, you have on the Indian, you got 120 horsepower and 87 foot-pounds of torque. Now on the Sportster S, you've got 94 foot-pounds of torque and 121 horsepower. So that's going to be a lot better performance-wise right out of the bat, because you're going to feel maybe a little bit better in performance, but you're going to have to look at the gear ratio, because the gear ratio is probably really going to be something that nobody thinks of. But when your horsepower is pretty close, but one bike could have a horsepower advantage, the other bike can have a gear ratio advantage, and they could be dead even. And actually, that's what it really looks like here. Without getting into too crazy of the numbers, you can look it up, but the gear ratios as far as each gear is pretty close. Fifth gear and sixth gear, you're going to get a little bit better gear multiplication on the Indian, and then the final drive, if I have figured it up right, because Indian gives you the final drive ratio, and the Harley gives you like the sprocket, so you have to figure that up. But Indian does, I'm not going to give you the numbers because I probably are going to do that wrong, but it does appear that the Indian is going to have a gear multiplication advantage. So it's going to have more torque multiplication. So that's probably going to make up for what little bit the Harley does have in more power. But identical price, almost identical weight, identical horsepower. These bikes are made to go against each other. And I think that's exactly what Harley did. That's what Harley was planning. And I think they wanted to come out with it, and they decided to do it at any means possible. So I would love to know what you guys are thinking about for this bike. I think it looks good. I think the fat front tire is a little off, but I don't have an issue with it completely. Now, I will say that the Indian has dual front discs, and the Harley only has a single front disc. Now, that was questioned, and Harley had stated that because of the lightweight bike, they did not need a dual disc in the front to slow this bike down. They said it works just fine because the bike is so light. I think maybe that's why it was detuned a little bit, because they can detune the motor and they can leave some parts off the bike and make more money, have a better profit margin. I wish they would have made it dual disc, because let's get a bigger person like me on there, and then you modify this bike and you're getting close to 200 crank horsepower. You're going to want that dual disc up in the front like the Indian has. So that's one thing I wish they just would have took the extra mile, especially at the $15,000 price point. So all in all, I think this bike is going to be amazing. Can't wait to ride it. Now if I ride it, I'm definitely going to want to go ride an Indian FTR, which I've definitely wanted to ride it in the past. I did compare that to the FTR S, which is, I think, their second in the line of the FTRs. There is a cheaper one, but I wanted to compare the one that looks to be identical to the Harley, and it's the same price point. But I think they've done a really great job with the bike, man, because I think it's the Bronx. And that's what I was really wanting Harley to come out with. So I'm excited about it. I want to know what you guys' thoughts process are. I hope to ride one so I can get some impressions. And can't afford one, but I definitely want to check this bike out. So comment down below. Let me know. Let everyone know. Let's start a discussion. What you think about this bike? Is it a hero? Is it a zero? Let us know. And now it is liquid cooled. It's basically like a mini V-Rod. I wasn't the biggest fan of the V-Rod because of the ergonomics. My brother had one, rode one, cool bike, fast bike. It just didn't fit me. It sucked to ride. But that was just personal. It is what it is. But appreciate you guys checking out the video. Please hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And keep it wretched.